Okay, so doing this one on request, because someone asked about attachment. So attachment seems to be a popular point of discussion, a popular question, especially when it comes to dealing with attachments in relationships. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to get this one whilst driving again. Anyway, so this is one that's easy to grasp for the mind, easy to grasp with intellectual logic, but more difficult, or can be, when it is put into practice and rather than just known but lived. This is one as well where the mind likes to come in and say yes but, or no but, or but my situation's different, or anything that's whenever the mind says yes but, or that's fine, but then you're already in it, you've missed it and you're in it. It's easy to, when these circuits are well wired, well practiced, it will just be automatic. And a good point to keep in mind here is that attachment is a form of addiction. So when we're talking about addiction, when the addiction is a psychological pathology, an illness of the mind, a mental illness. How do we know that? Because it causes damage, it causes suffering. When someone knows they're addicted to whatever and has consciously made the decision, I want to stop this, I want to stop doing this, I want to stop behaving like this, but the behaviour continues, then that behaviour is overriding the will of the person. The will to be addicted, the will to continue that behaviour, on some level overrides the conscious efforts of the person. So when we're talking about psychological pathologies, illnesses of the mind, we know that at least when the illness is active, it has the ability to hijack the autonomy of the subject, the autonomy of the individual, of the person. So it's not a choice. It's not a choice. So when it becomes a choice, when choice comes into the equation, then it's no longer an illness. It's no longer a psychological pathology. The addiction is cured because there is choice. So the addiction is, by definition, the absence of choice. That's what the whole problem is. The absence of choice. So there's a little paradox here that it's difficult for people to grasp sometimes. Attachment is an addiction. So what is an attachment? So attachment supposes or suggests duality, because there's something, the person, that is attached to something else, the object of attachment. So there are two things, that's duality. Attachment is that of the person. The person is the subject in which the attachment happens, let's say. And there can be attachments to anything, all sorts of things, all sorts of objects of attachment. You can become attached to anything. So you can become attached to objects, to people, to behaviours, to outcomes, to social things, status. You can become attached to philosophy, you can become attached to attachment. It goes on and on. Anything can be an attachment. Any form in this world, anything in this world can be an attachment. And as we know, attachment is a cause of great suffering. It's a cause of great suffering. The reason for that is because when we become attached to something or someone, our emotional state, our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviour and so on, our emotional state becomes dependent on that thing, the object of attachment, whatever it may be. So a simple example of this with an object, because that's the easier one to understand. For example, so for example, you get a new car. You become attached to that new car because it makes you feel good. It's exciting. You got something new. You feel good for a while. So that car is, or at least you think that car is the cause of your happiness or your excitement and so on. A few days later you crash the car's wrecked, and then that's the low that you feel upset or angry or sad because the object of your attachment, you've lost something there, it's become wrecked. That's just a simple example. So you've invested your emotional state into an object of attachment, and it's the same with people. Say friends, say relationships. You get into a relationship, even be it with a friend or some person. Okay, and this is a tricky one, and this is a very basic behavioural knowledge that I think it's amazing how many adults still behave like this, and it causes them a great amount of suffering. Whereas you should really learn this when you're a child. Is that so? You get into a relationship, and then most attachments are to mend or temporarily mend through the ups and downs of emotion, or try and fix that missing something in our lives, that sense of discontent, dissatisfaction, that background subtle suffering. So we get into a relationship and this person becomes the reason for us feeling good. And everyone knows this cycle in relationships, the high and the low. We say that this person is the cause of our happiness. So this is the dangerous part. We invest that by saying this person makes me happy, we are giving the control of our emotions up. We're allowing that person to have control, to dictate our emotional state. Our emotional state depends on this person. So eventually the relationship maybe goes sour. You see this person as a source of dissatisfaction again, but more profound, a source of unhappiness, a source of regret or sorrow. And now you're saying, this person did this to me, this person made me feel this way. Whereas the reality is that we are responsible for our own emotions, no one else. And life quickly becomes a disaster when we invest the control of our emotions into some object, something else. So for example, right, you're basically, because we are the ones that feel our emotions, that our emotions are ours, that's our experience. So if there are circumstances in our surrounding world and environment is dictating that, then we're all over the place. We are at the mercy of these objects of attachment, at the absolute mercy, and it can generate a lot of suffering. So whenever you said, this happened and it made me this person made me feel like this, you're pretty much guaranteeing your own suffering, essentially, because attachment. So put it like this way for perspective, right? So think about a time where someone or something happened that made you feel terrible, that made you upset, angry, whatever, very negative emotion. Is it possible for you to go through that same experience but be emotionally unfazed by it? To not have the suffering, to not be swayed in whichever way that causes you to feel bad, to feel terrible, no matter what it is? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Definitely. I can tell you that. The answer is yes. There's a way out. Even if, think of the worst thing someone's done to you. Even if someone, for no reason, strikes you, punches you in the face as they're walking past you in the street, yes, you'll feel the physical pain, but you don't have to suffer. The suffering is optional, it doesn't have to be there. Easy example for this is I used to box. Got punched in the face many a time, but did I go over it in my head, asking why has this person done this to me? Did I suffer? No, this is before the awakening, because the context, the framing, probably not a great example. Circumstance in which being punched in the face is totally okay. I only became attached to the outcome. Competition attached to the outcome. If someone beats me, I feel bad because I've been beaten and I'm no good. Another attachment. For example, say the car example I gave, you get a new car, you crash it, you feel bad. You're the one that feels bad. Does the car feel bad? The car's neutral, it's not anything. You get into a relationship with someone that goes sour, you feel bad. Does the other person feel bad? Maybe. Maybe not. Is it possible to know? Not really. Can we control how they feel? Can we control how they feel? No. Can other people control how you feel? Hopefully not. Hopefully not. So the difference is the framing, the difference is perspective, the difference is seeing through the illusion. So we get into a relationship, our idea of this person, the thing that we've constructed, how we relate to them and so on, that's not real. That's not real. It's a construct. The person is real, but our image of them, our construct of them, what we think they are, is a fiction. And in seeing through that for real is to be liberated from that bond of attachment. So something that really bothered you, really upset you, someone else may experience the same thing and it won't faze them. It's possible. It's more than possible. How do we know if we're attached to an object of attachment? This object of attachment dictates our emotional state. It can make us feel bad, it can make us feel good. If we lose this object of attachment, we feel like we've lost something, and that object of attachment has created in you, apparently, the feeling of loss, the feeling of sadness. Really, in reality, you have created this feeling of loss, feeling of sadness yourself. But like I said at the start, it's not necessarily a choice until it becomes a choice. It's automatic. But it's being consciously aware of this, allows us the ability to change that. If you're lost in it, there's no possibility of change until we can see clearly and see through it. So, attached to thinking, attached to trying to figure things out, trying to figure out your life situation, and so on. This is one that in the beginning we can clearly see. We can see these patterns and these thought streams in our mind playing out. Fiction, complete fiction. We can't stop thinking. We can't stop trying to control. It's a need to control. Ultimately, you're trying to control your own mood, your own how you feel, through trying to control your environment. Something that you don't have much control over at all. Whereas almost like the solution to this is to let go of that. You don't need things, you don't need something to feel good, you don't need an object of attachment to make you feel whole. Like I said, duality. Once you realise that we are all the same thing, there's a more profound, more constant, less erratic kind of satisfaction and kind of peace that comes with that. And some people will ask, does that mean that I can't experience love, that I can't have the highs and the lows of this, the highs, say I'm in love, I'm getting this huge high and this attachment. Noticing what that is that attachment? Are you getting that high because you've attached yourself to an object, say a person even? Okay, you start to figure out the difference between that, let's call it an unnatural attachment high, because you've got the highs and the lows. It's not steady, it's not constant. I could tell you that the constant state of peace and freedom is so much better, if I'm to put a value judgment on it, than those highs and lows, exciting as they may be. Because you can actually fully appreciate these things in life. You can clearly see them. You're not pulled all over the place emotionally by them. And these emotional pulls and highs and lows obscure our perception of reality and what's really there. It's about knowing yourself. It's about being self-aware enough to be honest with yourself and really ask the question, who is suffering because of this? Who is suffering? Am I suffering? Someone behaves in a way we don't like. Who suffers? Me? Does it have to be like that? Does it have to be that way? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's a matter of comprehension and perspective. And you can get to the point where you're not emotionally swayed by things. You're untouchable, emotionally solid, absolutely untouchable. Things that would have thrown you into a spiral of depression, before the behaviour of chasing these highs just to feel good for a bit, all that stuff doesn't even touch you, doesn't even faze you. It doesn't matter. It's the things mattering, having to control this matters because I need to figure this out. Even the attachment to enlightenment, what that means and what it is, that's a big hurdle at one point. The attachment to, because we're chasing this, we're on this path because we are trying to feel better, we're trying to fill that void with something to make us whole, something to make us feel better. ultimately the attachment just doesn't work. It doesn't work, and it generates suffering. So, and I've been there. I remember one of my relationships. It was just a constant repetitive cycle of those highs and lows. Very unhealthy, caused me a great deal of suffering. But you also, how can we spot this attachment? It's patterns. When you become aware of yourself, when you have a bit more self-knowledge, you can appreciate that these are just patterns, and you can relate them to anything. The object of attachment doesn't matter so much. It's the behaviour and the pattern, and the suffering that creates is the ego will just latch that onto anything. It could be anything. The thing doesn't matter. It's how you feel and what that pattern is like. And you notice that this is very repetitive. And initially, it'll be in retrospect. You'll be lost in it. Trying to feel better. Someone takes something away from you, or someone gives you something. Feel better or feel worse. You start to notice that when you've been through that, you look back and you think, well, why was I acting like that? Why those emotions came up and basically possessed me, took control of me. I was possessed by my emotions. I had no control. That's true. Yes, the emotions possessed you. They took control. And at that point in time, you weren't even in the driving seat. It was just this program, this pain body that comes up and basically just operates through you. It's like a form of possession, and then you come out of that state and you think, oh, what was that all about? In retrospect, you can look back, but practicing when that happens, do you know you're in it? So I got to a point where I would notice these things happening in real time, but then I would just allow them to happen anyway. And then there was a kind of like that little back and forth. And then there was a point where I noticed them happening in real time, and I had to make an effort to stay on top of it, be aware of what are you behaving like. You can feel these emotions are coming up, these thoughts are coming up, and the pattern's there waiting to be taken, waiting for you to pick it up. And we all have our triggers, but I would just kind of get through it, but then I hear the thoughts, trying to think about it afterwards, trying to find the solution to this. What's the solution? I need to work this out. And then after the first big shift, it was all playing out, but I wasn't in it. There was a separation there. Between that thought form. So thought form is like an entity of itself. That thought form that's out of control, I was watching it, but it still played out, and you observe how automatic it is. And but it didn't have the control. It wasn't controlling my behaviour. And then it was just gone. It was gone for a bit, and then it came back. But every time it comes back, it gets weaker and weaker, because I'm watching it, because I can see it. I'm aware. And it only operates to its full potential when you're not aware, when you can't see it. It's about being self-aware, being aware of yourself. So when interacting with other people, it's important to remember that you start to recognise these in other people, and if you're tuned into yourself enough, you can start to recognise what this other person's thought forms, where you and them connect in terms of strengthening the reaction, bringing that reaction up stronger, because you'll be magnetised towards people who have the potential to potentiate your positive or negative thought forms, either way, and it's being aware of that. And then you'll get to the point where at one point then these things can't touch you anymore. They can't touch you. You're not invested. You don't need the attachments that you previously did have. You don't need it. You don't need it. You don't need anything. It's not that you just don't care. It's not that you're completely indifferent. It's you don't need these things to provide you with your sense of self, this attachment validation, and the sense of freedom that gives you is incredible. And then you eventually start to notice that the things that would have triggered you before, people's behaviour, someone being rude, let's say, keep it mild, someone really trying to upset you, someone being malicious towards you, doesn't touch you. It doesn't touch you, and there's not that resentment there because you can see clearly. You know that they are unconscious, that you know that they're not operating with awareness. It's automatic. They're essentially possessed, unconscious, and then maybe the person will come back afterwards and say, "Oh, I'm sorry about that." They're apologising for their episode of whatever, but it's nothing to do with, say, me. Nothing to do with me taking it personally. When someone, I just happen to be at that point in time the object of whatever attachment that they're dealing with, because there's always an attachment, or maybe I'm in the road or something like that. Nothing to do with me. Nothing to do. You don't take things personally anymore at all, even if it's a well coordinated personal attack. Don't take it personally anymore, and you start to become hypersensitive to that unconscious manifestation of these thought forms in people, and then you can behave how you need to behave based on that. You start to notice, and when you are not perpetuating or potentiating that circuit in other people, sometimes they'll try and project it onto you more and more, and then it seems to vanish, and there's that moment of stillness in the person, or they might even lose interest in you and interacting with you because they're not getting what they need from you like they once did before. And relationships is a funny one because like reality is in the moment, and what we experience in the moment, we can experience kind of transcendent qualities. We can experience ourselves in others. We can experience that oneness that I talk about in others, in little glimpses. And when there's that opening there, we see that, and it's beautiful. It's a glimpse into enlightenment. But then around that, we layer our dysfunctions on top of that, and we start creating a narrative and a false representation of that transcendent moment of beauty, that ultimately is a fiction, that is ultimately false. So some practical, I hope that makes sense. So there's tons of stuff on this online, because what we're talking about is like basic behavioural therapy, and we're not talking about some mad non-duality stuff. There's tons of stuff online about this. You could look into CBT, and this is where the awakening starts to just cross paths with psychology and CBT. But yeah, like I likened it to addictions, very similar to addictions. In fact, it is an addiction. these attachments. But we're trying to make ourselves whole. We're trying to attach ourselves to something to close that circuit and become whole. If you become whole without that, which you can do, then you don't need these things anymore. You don't need these attachments. Radical changes in behaviour for the positive can happen. I mean, I can see how on awakening, some people will just change their entire life or their entire approach to life, because once you see it, once you get it, it's as simple as stepping out of it. Once you see it clearly, then you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. I didn't need to be suffering. In a way, I was choosing to suffer. I was choosing to let people control my emotions, whereas I'm responsible for my own emotions, and I can actually choose to be okay, to be happy. It's almost like a choice. Almost like a choice. But yeah, CBT is a good one to look into. Cognitive behavioural therapy, very simple, very objective, very facts-based and driven, and there are some kind of similarities there between awakening. But the relationships is a big one. Really, how we relate to other people is a big one, and there are lots of unconscious patterns there that will just dictate our life, our behaviour and our emotions until they're brought up to the conscious level, because they're essentially running you. You're being run by these programs and not even aware of it. I've had many of these programs myself. I'll not go into the details, but some of them extremely destructive, and I remember it. Extremely destructive patterns of behaviour, and I had to either, I think this is one of the reasons the awakening came about, I had to either fix this somehow, or it meant physical death. It was that. Either fix this dysfunctional thinking, this dysfunctional behaviour, or die. It's one of those two. So that's it. And I think that's the reason, when things get to that extent, you realise that the life or death thing, the small stuff doesn't matter so much, but you also realise how the small stuff is tied into that fear response, that Maslow's hierarchy response to your life situation, how your survival instinct is tied into these seemingly trivial events, how we respond like we're being threatened, based on our perception of what's going on. We're being threatened, and we feel that sense of threat in a profound way, because we've learned to be scared of everything, in a sense, because we think if these needs aren't met, it means suffering, and suffering is worse than death, apparently. Yeah, so going further than that, going further than that, when everything becomes one, there's no longer this sense of duality. You don't feel the need to become attached to something. You don't feel the need to continuously search to make yourself feel whole, to make yourself feel better. But you also don't have the unnatural highs. There's a constant state of okayness there. You don't have those highs that inevitably come with the lows. the crash, the depression, the feeling of loss. It's possible to exist without any of that. Because you're already whole. You're already whole, and you can begin to appreciate the simple things in life. It's not looking for the next high, mundane tasks, doing the washing, whatever. It's something that might have appeared boring before, in contrast to those highs and those lows, because it blunts your perception of reality. It blunts it because you're so overstimulated, and then you've got the dips. You're living off that high and the low, and it blunts your perception because you're not level. You're not level, you're not solid. What was I going to talk about? Yes, it's getting a long video. I was going to talk about the techniques to use. So, looking for it. So begin by looking for it. So look for either the repetitive thoughts. Just by being aware, look for the repetitive thoughts, and then look for the emotions. Easy to spot those emotions come up and the strong, and then observe if those repetitive thoughts are linked to those emotions, and what is triggering this. What is the trigger? What is the trigger? And then in knowing the trigger, you can then work on it. You can watch for it coming up, and think, when this comes up. So since I'm in the car and I had road rage before, I'm going to talk about road rage as an example. So say you get, I try not to swear in my videos as well, you get bothered, I'm just going to say something else, by other drivers. Someone doesn't let you in, someone beeps at you or whatever, and then you feel it in your body, you get all annoyed, you're shouting, you're beeping back, and it turns into an argument and escalates and so on, right? You know that's a problem of yours. You know what it feels like, you know what the thoughts are. Okay, so observe your thoughts when you're driving around. This is just an example. So when I'm driving around, I observe my thoughts. Someone does an annoying thing or whatever. Yeah, you observe that, and you notice it happening. You notice it happening in real time. You think to yourself, who is feeling this emotion? Who is suffering because of this? It's you, it's me. Am I allowing this other person to control my emotions? Am I letting my emotions be controlled by this other person? So if you're feeling, yes, okay, how to deal with that? Go into the feeling. Be aware of it. Let it be there. Don't look outwards. Don't look at the cause of this feeling. Look at yourself. Look inwards. What is this feeling? Why is this happening? And when you move your awareness into that, you find that it begins to dissipate. And when you're doing that, it almost takes your attention away from the outward situation that's there. It takes your focus, the blame away, and looking at yourself, because you're the one that's suffering because of this. And then think, sorry, I'm getting texts here. Sorry. And then think, is it possible for that event to happen and for me to be unfazed by it? Is it possible for me to view it differently? The answer is always yes. Is this person, this event, making me feel bad? No. Am I making myself feel bad? Yes. Yes, who's suffering? Me. Okay. Now we have some clarity on this. I'm the problem. I'm the thing that needs to change. Because I can't control all these other things. I have no control over that. I can't control it. What can I control? I can control myself. Maybe. After some practice. So then move the emotions in and observe where is it in your body, what does it feel like. Focus on yourself. You'll notice the emotion starts to dissipate. Observe afterwards or before. What are the thoughts? Am I thinking about it? Am I perpetuating this emotion? Am I torturing myself by mentally running through this event and making myself feel bad? And if the answer is yes, then meditation. They just go into the body. Practice, practice, practice. And there'll be ones that come up that you're like, oh, and you forget all about it. The ones that sneak up on you before you're aware of it and take you over. But it just comes through practice, practice, practice. And eventually get to the point where nothing can touch you and you're fine. Everyone else around you will go through their dysfunctional patterns. You might be the object of attachment. You might be someone else's cause for them to feel bad. But you don't resent them for it. You don't point the finger, you don't blame. Because you know that you have some clear sight as to what is happening with them. That they're causing themselves to suffer. And whenever possible it's like walking a tightrope. Whenever possible you can change your behaviour in a way that's going to benefit other people, that's going to help other people, that's going to allow them to wake up or allow them to maybe feel better, without perpetuating the dysfunctional behaviour patterns or thinking. So that's quite a long video, so I'll leave it there.